what we're doing now is we're wanting to share our findings with student mental health organisations and networks, which is why we contacted the Student Mental Health Research Network and why we've been invited to present this to you today, because we really want to share our learning as far and wide as we can. We're quite happy to share the model and the resources that support the model. In fact, the resource that supports the model is the leaflet that I think you probably have already received. And that's a PDF of the leaflet that you can print off double-sided, and it just folds up into a neat, it's a pity I haven't got one in front of me, I should have thought of that, but folds up into a neat trifold leaflet. We're happy to share those free of charge with other universities, and one of the things that we did there as well, we made sure it wasn't branded so people can use it in other universities without it being associated with the University of York. Although it does mention the University of York in case people want to contact myself or Martin about the approach. And we're currently working on a journal publication, again, to disseminate our findings as widely as we can. Now, the University of York is a collegiate university. So when we ran this project, we had 9 colleges. We've got 11 now. We've got 2 new ones. But in a collegiate university like York, all students are allocated to one of, as it was then, 9 colleges. And generally, that's where those students allocated to that college live in their first year. They might move out of halls in their second, third, fourth years, but they remain a member of that college unless for some reason they ask to be moved to another college. So the colleges have a college team which consists of a college manager. So at the time of running this project, I was a college manager for Constantine College at York, and we also have a college administrator and then a team of tutors. That model's been, the tutor model has been replaced, but it's a team of college life coordinators and college life advisors. Basically, the roles are the same. They're to work with students, they run events, try and help students have a good experience of university life, make friends, get involved, and help students to deal with any problems that arise. And basically, anecdotally, when we're talking in our own teams and when we're talking as college managers across the colleges, our observations were that most students tend to have a positive experience of university early on, and they're able to find other people who share interests with them and get involved in activities without needing too much support. For a lot of other students, the support that they need is really limited to needing more information about what sorts of groups and activities are available. And then once they have that information, they're able to get involved with groups and activities and make friends on their own. But what we noticed was that some students face additional barriers to involvement, and that includes things like not sharing common interests with flatmates and course mates. It could be social anxiety. They might have a disability that prevents them getting involved in certain activities. They might experience depression or other mental health conditions, or they might have a lack of motivation or lack of confidence. And we noticed that impacted on their academic performance and engagement, and basically their enjoyment of the wider university experience apart from academia. Now, although I said that those students who face additional barriers tend to be in the minority in terms of needing support, what we wanted was we thought we really, as a team, and for our tutors and our team of student mentors, so each college also has a team of student mentors who are students who will volunteer to mentor other students and visit them in the flats and check how they're getting on. We thought we reflected on our experience of working with socially isolated students, and we thought that there was something lacking, and we needed to be better equipped and more confident to help students get involved, make social connections, attain their university goals outside of academia, and basically take a full and active part in university life. And Martin, I think this is over to you now for these next few slides.
Yeah, I'll pick up on the adaptation to the model called Connecting People, which we used in this particular project. The primary approach with students previously had been just to provide information about what's going on, and students as staff get bombarded with loads of emails, other information about activities and so on. But we wanted to move beyond that to information plus support, particularly for those who are more isolated, less likely to engage with something that they've just heard about or received information about. And we turn to the Connecting People model as an approach to guide us with that and to provide a bit of structure for those who might be a little bit uncertain about providing that additional support. So we trained staff and student volunteers in this approach over and conducted an evaluation over 4 years during the COVID period, as Jonny will elaborate in a moment. Now, the model itself was to aim to reduce social isolation, increase feelings of well-being, and help people to access, increase their social networks, increase their access to social capital. And this was developed and evaluated for people with mental health problems who were receiving care either in a voluntary sector service or with the community mental health team, so in health and social care. And we found that when the model was implemented in full, it led to these kind of outcomes, but the full model isn't required in this particular context with university students, so we needed to adapt it. And it has been adapted for other purposes, in other countries and with other groups as well. The website is there if you want to take a look at the model in more depth. There's downloadable materials there in terms of guidance documents and so on. So in terms of the adaptation, we had 8 main steps in the original model, and that was simplified and adapted down to 3. We produced just 1 leaflet to contain everything that we needed to provide some handy hints to those who were utilising it, and it kept the main elements but really put it into a user-friendly guide for those who are using it with students. And this, in summary, is what it does. Planning, doing, reviewing, very, very straightforward in terms of, first of all, meeting with a student to plan what they would like to do. So it might be, for example, going through their interests, some of the information about what they've received, about what's going on, or identifying things which they may not be aware of, but opening their kind of awareness, increasing their awareness about other opportunities, and then supporting them to actually access that. So it's not just about signposting, but it's a bit more active in terms of providing support as required for the individual student to actually go along and engage with something. Quite often, for many people, it's about going along to the first time. So it might be making introductions, meeting the group leader, or even just going along with a bit of peer support. And then following that up with checking out how it went, reviewing what went well, what didn't go so well, or if the person wasn't able to make it along, then to have that follow-up check with them in terms of what would they like to do differently next time, or if it all went well and things are good, they've engaged with that group, then there's no need for any further involvement. So it's really very, very simple and straightforward, really, but the little bit of extra structure, and you can see by the graphic there in terms of the resource which we provide, just provide that little bit of extra help and support to the mentors, the tutors, and others who use the approach. So I think that's pretty much what I've said. Mapping out the current social networks, identifying particular goals and barriers, solutions. Yeah, Jonny, do you want to pick up from here?
Yeah, so we deliver that in around about a 2-hour training course to students, mentors and staff. And obviously today we're giving you a really brief overview of that, but actually when we deliver this, when we go through the training, we go into it a lot more detail. For example, how do you map out people's current social networks? How do you ensure that you really understand the particular situation that the student is in at the moment? Who are they connected with on their course? Who are they connected with in their flat? And it might be nobody, but there might be 1 or 2 connections that they've got at the moment. So it's about exploring things from their perspective, and trying to then develop conversations and draw students into conversations that maybe you wouldn't otherwise have had. So we know that from working with students before, talking to them and saying, you know, what sort of things do you want to do? And quite often people will shrug their shoulders and say, I don't really know. If you ask them what their interests are, not really sure. It's quite difficult to get that rapport going. So quite a bit of the training focuses on that, mapping out social networks and developing that conversation and rapport before you can move into talking about interests and goals and then potential barriers and solutions. So we're not going to go into the detail there today, but I will share more detailed slides with you afterwards, and you'll all get a copy of that. And within those slides, you'll see the training as we deliver it. So it is a lot more detailed than what we're going through today. So I'm just going to go through in terms of the research that we undertook on this. First of all, the methods. So staff and student volunteers were trained in delivering the model. So that was student mentors, and we had our teams of tutors, college life coordinators, college administrators and college managers. So over the 4 years, we engaged 105 people who voluntarily took part in the research. And it was a fairly simple research design because that's all, to be honest, that's all we had capacity to be able to deliver in terms of evaluating this model. So we picked a fairly simple research design, and that involved administering a questionnaire before participants received the training, administering it again just after they've received the training, and then administering a third questionnaire 5 or 6 months after they'd received the training, when they'd had a chance to use the model in their practice, when they'd had a chance to work with students and deal with any issues around social isolation. Now, each of those questionnaires carried 9 ratings questions in them, and they were a simple 1 to 10 scale that assessed confidence and ability to do the different bits of the Connecting People model, which was assessing social isolation, mapping social networks, exploring interests, setting goals, identifying barriers, overcoming barriers, making an action plan, implementing that plan, and reviewing progress. So we asked people to rate their confidence and ability to do those different elements of the model. Now, in the different questionnaires, we also had some free text questions that varied. So just after they'd received the training, we asked people if they intended to use the model. 5 or 6 months later, when they'd had a chance to use the model, we asked them, had they used the model? And then we also asked them whether students got involved in social activities as a result of using the model, and in what ways. Now, the ratings analysis, when we looked at the 9 questions, we realised there was quite a high internal consistency. So we were able to treat the questions as a single scale. So rather than conducting analysis on each of the questions individually over the 3 time points, pre-training, post-training, and 5 or 6 months later, we were able to just compare the overall ratings as a single scale. And what we found is there was a statistically significant increase in confidence from pre-training to post-training. Now, we might expect that because people pre-training don't know much about it, and post-training they know a lot more about what the model is and what the elements are. But equally, people could overestimate their confidence and ability pre-training, and maybe perhaps realize during the training they don't quite know as much about that topic as they expected. But either way, we did see a pretty big increase in confidence from pre-training to post-training. But the important thing is that confidence level stayed high 6 months post-practice. So once they'd had the chance to go out there and use the model, their level of confidence 6 months later was still high. Now, you might expect that level of confidence to tail off, because if people hadn't used the model, they might have forgotten what it was about, and therefore their confidence levels might have gone down. Or they might have used the model and it might have been complete rubbish, and they might have, it might have led to adverse outcomes, and therefore that might have damaged their confidence in using it. But it didn't, it stayed really high. So that was quite pleasing, quite high effect size from pre-training to post-practice. And that pattern held across all 4 years that we ran the evaluation. When we looked at the post-training analysis, so that's just after they've received the training, everybody who answered that questionnaire, now there was attrition throughout, so 105 people filled in the first questionnaire. The second questionnaire, 12 people didn't complete that second questionnaire. But of the people that did, 100% of them said that they felt the training had equipped them to work with people who were isolated. And there's a few quotes there where people explain that they felt like it gave them a clear framework to use. It helped them to understand social isolation in a way that they hadn't before. And it also helped them to break down the conversation and the plan into individual parts that they could work through methodically, but also help them to visualize student networks. So that's how people felt just after they'd received the training. After they'd, before we move on to after practice, we asked them as well, just after they received training, do you intend to use the model? And everybody again said they did. Some people said that from their own experience, they'd worked with other people who had social anxiety and they thought those techniques would be really helpful. Other people said that the training had helped to equip them with more knowledge about university systems and support systems and things like that. But one individual here, for example, said that somebody had used it with them when they were a student in their first year, and they found it really, really helpful, and it helped to engage them with activities that they wanted to get involved in, and then that had come full circle, because now they were being trained in the model as a mentor to use it with other people. In the post-practice analysis, which was, as I said, 5 or 6 months after they'd had a chance to use the model, we asked people whether they'd worked with socially isolated students, and 2/3 said they had. Almost 2/3 said connecting people had helped them to work with socially isolated students, and about 1/3 said it hadn't helped. But most of the people who said it hadn't helped was around about not having had the opportunity to use the model, rather than saying that they'd used it and it didn't work. So people told us that using the connecting people again, that the structure was really helpful, but they also, a couple of respondents said they felt it was particularly useful with students with autism because of the structure and the clarity of the process. People said that it helped people to make connections with other people on and off campus, and then people that didn't use it tended to say that they felt that it might have been helpful, but they didn't get the chance to use it. For example, the flat that they were mentoring for, they didn't come across any socially isolated students. Now, we asked people how many students they'd worked with in using this model, and that ranged from 1 to 20. The median was around about 2, and I give a simple graphic here where, you know, quite a lot of people only used it with 1 student, but quite a lot of people used it with between 2 and 4 students, and then a few people use it with 5 or more students. And we asked people, you know, did the students make friends? And out of the respondents, 31 said yes, 23 said no. But the reasons for not making friends were about not having the opportunity to use connecting people, rather than because it didn't work. And actually, in the qualitative reports that people get, in the qualitative answers to the questionnaires that people gave, that there weren't any negative qualitative reports of having used it and it having led to any adverse impacts. So that it doesn't look necessarily like a great deal of people said that students, it helped them to make friends, but actually that's out of 60 respondents because of the attrition rate from time point 2 to time point 3. We also asked people 5 or 6 months in that final questionnaire, after they'd had a chance to use it, if you were continuing as a tutor or a mentor, or if you were going on into another role where you were working with students, would you intend to use it in future? And as you can see here, 90% of respondents said yes, they would use it in future. So even those people who hadn't had the chance to use it still felt that it would be useful if they had that opportunity. Now, I just want to mention the impact of COVID, because we ran this study over 4 years and COVID came along in the middle. When we went into lockdown in March 2020, it didn't affect the 2019-2020 delivery, because most interventions took place before lockdown. So most students that mentors and staff were working with that work had been completed by March. Students had been there from September, and by March they'd worked through most students that were experiencing problems and issues and wanting to make friends and get involved and things like that. That work had happened, so it didn't affect that year, but we thought that it might affect the 2020-2021 lockdown period, because we thought, well, you know, social interactions, as we all know, were severely restricted for that whole academic year. Lectures and seminars moved online, and there was very little opportunity to mix with other people outside of people's households, either socially or academically. So we expected the intervention would be less effective due to those reduced opportunities. But actually, the evaluations were consistent with the non-COVID years. There was no significant difference between the number of students worked with over the 4 evaluation years. And the qualitative feedback we got during COVID was as positive as it was outside of COVID. Martin, is this back to you? Because I can't actually see the slide numbers on the whole.
I can pick it up for the next few ones. Yep, that's sure.
Yeah, I think you're through to the end now.
All right. Okay. So we explored some of the reasons for not using the approach, and the responses are here. It was not appropriate to